Hi everyone, wishing all of you a very happy Holi today. For the past 2 months, ever since Donald Trump became the president of the United States of America, he has been talking about tariffs that he will impose on all the trading partners across the world. He has not spared China, Canada, Mexico, India. So, what do these tariff threats actually mean? In this video, we will decode these tariffs and we will also decode the real impact it has on you. So, what are tariffs? Tariffs are essentially the taxes imposed on imported goods by a country. When a country raises tariffs, it makes foreign products more expensive, theoretically encouraging domestic production. But does it actually work? That is the biggest question, ain't it? But what does this really mean for businesses and consumers? Let's explore this and let's discuss the three possible scenarios which can unfold. Watch the video till the very end, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of value out of it. Uh, if you haven't subscribed yet, I would request you to subscribe to my channel, and that is the only thing I'll ever ask of you. Please subscribe. I'll try and make better and better videos going forward. Now, back to the video. Scenario one, where America raises the tariffs on a particular country and the other country simply refuses to respond in any which way. In this case, what will be the impact on the US economy? In the short run, everything which the US imports from that country will become more expensive. From cars to clothes to electronics to anything you import from that country will become more expensive instantly. Prices, if I've got to believe Mr. Trump, can rise anywhere between 10% to about 100% from the current levels on these imported goods. Higher prices, of course, lead to inflation, reducing the consumer's purchasing power. Either people will pay more and more for the same set of goods, or they will cut back on spending and consumption. Reduced consumption leads to lower demand, which can cause, in turn, job losses, potentially triggering a recession. And the argument for bringing manufacturing back to the US is a flawed one. US wages today are probably one of the highest across the world, leaving around a few Scandinavian countries, which essentially means that the cost of producing an item in US will inherently be more expensive due to higher labor costs. So I'm not very sure whether the manufacturing will actually move back to US even in the longer run. Well, only time can tell you the details. But if I've got to take an example, back in 2018, Donald Trump raised tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The aim was to revive the domestic steel production and aluminum production. While in the short run, steel companies did see some benefits, but the industries which were dependent on these raw materials for their production, like cars, they faced higher costs, which in turn led to price hikes, which in turn led to lower demand and job cuts, and so on and so forth. So essentially, the same tactic deployed once has backfired. Now, what will be the impact on the exporting country? The exporters may initially reduce their margins to keep prices competitive, but eventually the costs will be passed on to the consumers, in turn raising prices in the United States. There could be a dip in demand as a result, a lowering of demand as a result. But for larger exporters like China and India, two options exist. One, the government can subsidize the manufacturers to offset the tariff burden. Straightforward. And I believe the stronger governments like India and China do have this option. And second, the exporter will diversify its customer base. It will find alternate customers to sell to beyond the US. US, of course, is the biggest consumer in this world, but an exporting powerhouse like China is very highly dependent on US demand for its factories to keep running. But for somebody like India, even if exports to US fall a little, it will not really make a difference. Now let's come to scenario 2. The other country essentially lowers its tariffs on American imported goods. Example, India has reduced its tariff on the import of American made single malt whiskies. But honestly, India exports software services and imports whiskies. IMFL, India made foreign liquor, still has 90% market share. The foreign made liquor has maybe 5, 7, 10%, and that too within a limited population. Simply because the prices of US made whiskey has dropped a little will make no dent on the domestic liquor industry. But at the same time, a US cannot afford to replace India as a software exporting partner immediately. So for India, it was a no-brainer to reduce tariffs on US goods. Same goes for Tesla. Tesla, the import duties have been cut on electric vehicles. But the point is, a Tesla produced in America can never be as competitive as a Tesla produced in China. And if any which way Tesla has to supply a vehicle made in China to India, how does it help Donald Trump in his promise of bringing manufacturing back to USA? It makes no logical sense. In this case, what's the impact on the US economy? This is the ideal outcome which the US president is hoping for. Lower foreign tariffs could, in theory, boost US exports. But the bigger question which we just spoke about remains, will US manufacturers be able to compete globally despite their high labor costs? While this could give the president some political leverage, in reality, manufacturing in US is more expensive than most other countries, making price competition extremely difficult for US manufacturers. An example we just discussed was US liquor and Tesla cars. What will be its impact on the partner country? Let's say India in this case. The domestic industry may face a little increased competition from slightly cheaper US goods. But as we just discussed, liquor made in US or a Tesla made in US will never be able to compete in terms of costs with a product made in India. Of course, Tesla as a product may be much better and it may sell because of that, just like an iPhone sells. But at the same time, an iPhone is today manufactured in India because of its lower labor costs. If the same iPhone was to be manufactured in America, I am sure the cost will be at least 30% higher than what we are getting today. And then it will not sell as much as it does today. Also, today, whatever India imports from America is minuscule compared to its total imports. Reduction in tariffs there will not really impact the domestic market or domestic consumption behavior in any meaningful way. So I believe it's a non-issue. And most of the world will agree to lowering tariffs to goods it imports from America just to ensure that the trade friction is not there and the current trade traction continues. Now, the scenario 3, and which is the most interesting, and this will happen only with larger trading partners, China being a prime example, is that the other country will retaliate and impose tariffs on US, additional tariffs on goods imported from US as a response. Now, what will happen in this case? Specifically with China, the US imports everything from China. uh, Critical items, non critical items, consumption, crockery, furniture, you name it, it imports from China. Everything which the US imports will become more expensive for the US consumer. Also, since China has not reduced tariffs, US exports still remain uncompetitive, and due to additional tariffs which China has imposed, the US exports will also take a hit because what was earlier expensive has become more expensive now for the Chinese consumer. So, higher prices to the US consumer plus reduced exports of US businesses mean businesses will close and job losses will happen, pushing the economy towards recession at a much, much faster pace. In a slightly longer run, even if factories move to US as a consequence of all this tariff wars, the prices which the US consumer will end up paying will be much, much higher than the prices it used to pay when goods were imported from China or India. So the fact remains, if this trade war continues, the US consumer will surely lose. What happens to China as a economy in case it stands? Well, almost 30% of China's exports today go to US. So, and China is a primarily export driven economy. So, domestic industries in China are bound to face pressures and there will be closures there. China can try and diversify by increasing and ramping up exports to other countries across the world, but filling up a 30% or 35% gap is not easy. So, China will also face severe economic pressures, and Chinese factories, if they close, there will be a domino effect on every other aspect right till the Chinese consumer and Chinese citizen. So yes, this tariff war may cost China and US both dearly, but yes, it will hurt America more than it will hurt China. If a US made car is more expensive for a Chinese consumer, will he prefer to import the car from, let's say, a German factory, which may be slightly cheaper? For sure, the quality of Germans is as good as the US quality, in fact, perceived to be better at any time. So it will, of course, be more than happy to import it from China. So if the trade war continues, then there will be 20 more people in countries ready to supply to China as compared to US factories, and it will hurt US more and more. So, what's the conclusion? The conclusion, according to me, the president is just playing a game of poker. He's bluffing everyone when he says he will raise tariffs on everything imported into the country. It's simply not possible to do that and get manufacturing back to the country. A better way to get manufacturing back into the country will be to give subsidies to manufacturers to set up, incentives to manufacturers to set up in the country, rather than these penalties. Also, US is known for its innovation and research today rather than the manufacturing capacities. Yes, it started from there, but today manufacturing of the world has moved to the Asian country subcontinent. There's no question on it. And there is no way in which a European or a US manufacturer can compete with the labor costs which are available in India and China. So my thinking is, US president is bluffing, and sooner or later all these discussions on increasing tariffs and everything will die down and it will be business as usual sooner than later. The president cannot afford to antagonize the US consumer as such by stoking inflation, which this war is sure to do. So the bottom line is tariffs are a political tool, but their economic impact is complex and often counterproductive. They do aim to protect domestic industries, but they usually result in higher costs for consumers and businesses. Retaliatory tariffs can, of course, further disrupt global trade, making goods more expensive, leading to job losses, factory closures. Personally speaking, tariff war is not a good way to boost an economy. There are much better avenues available. So, what do you think? Are tariffs a smart move or a costly mistake? Let's discuss in comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into such economic topics and, of course, company analysis. Until next time, have a great day. Bye bye.